Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the April 8th, 2021 Downtown Parking Committee meeting for April. If I could have the roll call, please.
Matt Labrie,
Present.
Andrew Newkirk,
Yep.
Sean Pratt, Ed France,
Here.
Barbara Silver,
Here.
and Ruben Zarate.
Here.
And Chair Pinner.
Here. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 3. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Great, thank you very much. At this time, we'll open up the meeting to public comment. This section of the agenda is for public comment for items not on today's agenda, but in the purview of the Downtown Parking Committee. And I will ask Ms. Clark to explain how we can do public comment over the internet here.
Sure. For those of you who have not participated in a GoToWebinar before for a public meeting to make an oral public comment, you're going to use the raise your hand button that you can see over on your GoToWebinar control panel. It's that little green hand looking or the little hand looking thing with a green arrow. So just click that. I'll see it and I'll call on you, at which point you'll be able to unmute yourself and speak and make a comment. So right now, Mr. Pinner, I don't see any hands raised.
I'm sorry, I think I was muted there. At this time, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of February 11th, 2021. As you recall, we had a cancellation of our March meeting, so we're going back to February minutes. And I'll entertain a motion.
Go ahead, Matt.
I would move that we adopt the minutes as presented.
I have a first from Mr. Labrie. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second from Mr. France. Great. Any discussion regarding the motion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and do the roll call, please.
Committee member Ruben Zarate,
Yes.
Matt Labrie,
Yes.
Andrew Newkirk,
Yes.
Barbara Silver,
Yes.
Ed France,
Yes.
and Chair Pinner.
Yes. If I may note, I do believe we missed Mr. Zarate in the roll call, so we should just note that he is present, because I don't think we caught him in the roll call.
Thank you.
Okay, great. The motion passes and minutes are approved. We'll move on to item number 6, budget and parking operations update. Good morning, Mr. Dayton.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you so much for being here on this early April morning. Awesome weather in Santa Barbara per usual. And just want to intro this item for Ms. Clark, who will do the presentation. And I just want to say upon intro that, you know, it has been, I don't know how long since Victor Garza, our fearless leader of downtown parking, retired. And so we have been, as you may have known, I have filled the role. The office that I'm in is actually Victor's office, and Jessica Grant is taking over many leadership responsibilities over in the other half of our division, transportation planning. And I just want to say it's just been an awesome experience for me to work with our three supervisors, Ms. Clark, Roy Forney, and Dion Tate. They have been doing an amazing job. I'm meeting with them every week. And specifically to this item, this team is highly engaged in how we can, moving forward, now that the state is finally opening things up and some of our parking numbers are returning, and Ms. Clark's going to tell you that story, at how we capture the revenue and do our hiring back so that we're capturing the most revenue that we can to right the ship, as it were, from the heavy losses we've experienced during this pandemic over the last year. So with that intro, Ms. Clark, take it away and let us know what's going on.
Sure thing. Good morning, Chair Pinner and members of the committee. We're going to go through some budget updates. This is going to look more like the ones that we've done in previous months, where we have looked at the previous month's revenues and expenditures and what our trends are looking like. So if we can go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So this is a parking occupancy data for March of this year compared to March of the past 2 years. This chart in the previous months that we've looked at it has been sort of the same story. It's always just shown that we're down significantly over previous years, but we have a little bit of a different story this month. Unfortunately, it's for some sadder reasons, in that March of 2020 marked the beginning of the pandemic and all the related shutdowns. And so you see that reflected in this occupancy data here. The green line that you see is from 2019. Obviously, that's that's more of a standard year. The blue line is last year, and you'll see that's a bit closer to where we are. We're actually up a bit over March of last year, because starting at about March 17th last year, we were completely shut down. So we closed all of the lots and removed all of the staff. So that's when the world went into sort of that hard stay-at-home shutdown order, and our parking numbers reflect that. So the trends that you're going to see from here on out are going to be a little bit different. The good news is things are improving out in the lots as more things are reopening. So we'll move to the next slide, please. And you can see that in our revenues as well. Again, the green bar is from 2019, which would be closer to a normal year. The blue bar is from 2020, and then the orange bar is for this year. You'll see we did make a bit more money in 2020. If you look at the lot by lot breakdown, you'll notice that the lots where we're able to stay open later, the Victoria lot, the Ortega garage, particularly lot 11, lot 12, we are able to make enough revenue to overcome where we were at least last year. Again, we're not back up to where we would be in a normal year, but we are able to recover, to collect more revenue with those lots, whereas the lots where we're not able to staff later shifts at this time, we're breaking much closer to where we were in 2020. So again, the trends are looking a little bit different this month. Overall on our trajectory, things are increasing a bit. So let's see what that looks like in terms of our budget and our revenues and expenditures for the past month. So March 2020, we ended up spending, or excuse me, we ended up bringing in about $977,000 in total revenue. We had budgeted to bring in only about $586,000 for 2021. February, just to recap, since we weren't here in February, we didn't have a meeting last month. We brought in about $493,000, and then for March of this year, we did a little bit better than that. So we're up to about $370,000 in revenue. For expenditures, our expenditures are down for February and March. They were relatively constant, but they're down a bit from where they were this time last year, where we were spending around $660,000 a month for expenditures there, and ending up positive for our net operating budget. For February, we ended up only being in the red to the tune of about $11,000, which sounds great and we'll take it, but I just want to qualify that a little bit. There were a few unusual things with the budget February that make it different from March. If you look for March, we're about $190,000 in the red for the month, which is still an improvement for where we've been in previous months. But it's not quite as good as February, and I want to explain that. First off, PDIA revenues, let's recall, are billed quarterly. So our income from those revenues is not consistent from month to month. It tends to be the largest in the month that we bill, so the first month of the quarter and the month following, and then the final month before we do the next billing, we tend to receive very little revenue. So February, we had much higher revenues for PDIA. We made about $79,000 there, whereas for March, because we're in the last month of that quarter, it's much lower, so we only brought in about $19,000 a month. But the biggest thing here that is making that difference in terms of our revenues is that in February, our second quarter budget adjustments posted to our account. So this is really more of like a back-end internal accounting thing. We had some capital projects with some unused funds that we were able to close out and move that money back into our downtown parking fund, which resulted in a transfer in of around, I think, $130,000 that we would not normally see. So it's that the difference that you're seeing there in expenditures is not actually, in revenues is not actually that we made a lot more from services in February. It's that we had these kind of adjustments on the back end that resulted in more money entering into our budget. However, if you look at our revenues from service charges, so that includes our hourly parking, our permits, things like that, we made about $17,000 more in March than we had in February. So the actual service charges are increasing, but I just wanted to kind of explain why that overall trend looks like we took a big hit to our revenues this month. We didn't. The overall trend is on an upward trajectory, and you can see it if you click over to the next slide. So if you look at the blue line, those are those expenditures. Like I said, those have been fairly constant for about the past 3 months, which is good. The revenues, you do see that spike there for February and before it comes back down for March. But if you look kind of on the whole, it's trending a little bit upward. So the red line again at the bottom is kind of what we're keeping track of, and that's our operating net. We're always hoping that that line gets close to that black $0 line. So, that's where we're at right now with our budget. I believe this is the last slide that I have. So if anybody has any questions, we can go ahead and address those.
Well, thank you, Ms. Clark. I do have a question or question/comment. So I noticed with the slide that gave the bar graphs, it looked as if we're getting close to maybe on the, if we could back up one more, I think it is. There we go. Thank you. So it looks like we're getting close to maybe a quarter to some lots, close to a few lots, almost 50% of what I would say is normal in the green. So again, positive trend, great to see that. I noticed that we're still with the depot lot. I don't think we're manning the depot lot at this point, correct? So
That's correct, yes.
What do we see as an expectation there? I know that lot I think is a 2-person or a 2 kiosk. So obviously that's an impact because it requires two folks. So just wondering about that.
Sure, we are continuing to adjust our staffing as we're able in an effort to best recover revenues while not exceeding our revenues with our expenditures. So we're continuing to keep an eye on that. And the next presentation, actually, Roy's gonna talk a lot more about that and about what we're looking at for the months ahead. Of course, we've all heard the announcement from the governor that came this week that full reopening is expected on June 15th. So we are in the process of staffing up and doing what we can to get our lots back to full staffing and back to a level that we would have seen pre-pandemic, again, in an effort to collect as much revenue as possible from the lots, while at the same time remaining flexible. So where we have low occupancy lots, where we've got lots where we wouldn't recover the cost of staffing, pulling people out of those kiosks so we're not losing that revenue. So we're remaining flexible, and we are in the process, again, I'll let Roy give you some more details on that, but we are in the process of staffing up and keeping some of these lots open later and hopefully reopening the depot lot soon. So.
And I just have a follow-up question on that. Do we, pre-pandemic, we were obviously very focused on our lots, but we were also, I think, working on obtaining the data from the California hotel parking lot, because it, mirrors our lot structure, and I think we had a relationship in getting that data. I was just asking it for, obviously that had probably maybe not become an important request during the pandemic, but I'm just interested to know maybe with that lot, if we're able to start looking at getting that data again and understanding how that's comparing, because obviously it's near the depot lot, just good data for us to continue to monitor. So thank you. I don't, before I open up for public comment, are there any other questions from the committee? Mr. Labrie.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Sarah, thanks for a solid report. My question is the last horizontal graph, the break-even number, does that take into consideration our burn rate on reserves? Was that strictly an operational? In other words, maybe I'm just drawing the attention to the fact that we still maybe hurting even though we break even on a daily operational basis, unless that takes into consideration kind of replenishment of reserves.
Right, so this does not, this is operating revenues and expenses only. So it does not account for our capital funding. So this doesn't, I mean, it reflects it reflects impacts to reserves in that, certainly, the amount that we are below that $0 line reflects a use of reserves to support our operating expenses. However, it does not account for capital expenses. So this line does not account for the full impact to reserves that we see on a month-to-month basis.
So, Mr. Chair, I know it's not necessarily important to have this as part of the monthly occupancy report, but I always think it's good to remind ourselves of really what the lots need to be generating in order for us to maintain a reasonable capital budget. And not just be continually, using those reserve monies. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labrie. Good point. All right. Any other committee comments before public comment? Okay, Sarah, if you could open up public comment, please.
Sure thing. So any member of the public who wishes to speak on this item, go ahead, use the raise your hand button and go to webinar. Okay, and I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and close public comment. So I'm having to plug in my iPad, which is telling me I'm about to run out of power, and that would not be good for continuing the meeting. So sorry for that movement there. All right, we'll close public comment on item number 6. So just bring it back to the committee. Any other questions or comments for staff? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move it over to item number 7. I'm going to jump off screen for a minute, and if Ed France could take over, because I need to get a plug to plug in my iPad here. So I'm going to jump off for just a sec.
It's just like the downtown State Street, flexible and nimble all times.
Great. Mr. Dayton, if you'd take it away for item number 7.
Yeah, let's do item 7. We're going to bring on Mr. Roy Forney, and he is in charge of operations here. So he does all the staffing, and his staff also is doing some of the estimating about to try to figure out where is the next place that we can staff to capture those revenues. So I'm going to introduce a little bit about this. So as you know, the council decided we were going to go to an automated system. Remember, the story is that the pandemic changed operations significantly downtown. Actually, Ms. Clark, maybe Mr. Penner, maybe you could mute your mic while you're doing your thing on the, just so it doesn't cause the distortion. So the pandemic, we had this huge drop. Of course, we had to stop operations. Downtown was shut down. We lost our customers, and without customers, we didn't have any revenue. So there's three ways. There's three ways to right the ship in terms of the revenue. And as you will recall, committee members, we were already in that downward slope where we weren't capturing the revenue we need to make the parking system whole and to be able to manage it effectively. So the pandemic worsened that situation. There's three ways to right the ship. Those are either to raise downtown parking fees, to reduce or eliminate the complimentary period, or automate the system and reduce the amount of labor we have. So out of the three options, well, none of them are attractive. The one that had the least amount of pushback is the automation. It does mean that many of our people in our kiosks will not be there in the future, and Mr. Forney is going to talk about that. This item, moving from, in a short period of time, because we are doing this as a reaction to the pandemic, is a very tricky process. The staff has been amazing at figuring out what is the plan, how do we operate. So this presentation that Mr. Forney is going to give you really takes us through the whole process. And I'm just going to tell you the end of the story. He's going to repeat me as well. Is the end of the story is after Christmas in January, when the least amount of customers for the year will be around. That's when we will be pulling the trigger, so to speak, and having the system fully automate. And we're going to be testing out fully automation. Up from now until January, there are a host of activities that need to occur in order to prepare for that moment next January, where automation is fully engaged. And so, Mr. Forney, thank you so much for being here to give the committee the workings of that plan and what we are working with to get to that point next January. Thank you.
Good morning, Vice Chair France, committee members. My name is Roy Forney. I'm the Parking Operations Supervisor. This morning, I'm going to be reviewing our automated license plate recognition updates and implementation milestones. Next slide, please. So in February, we had our SCIDATA team. They came up and installed our new revenue control software to version 14. This version 14 is going to give us the ability to upgrade our hardware and have new methods of payment options. Next slide, please. So the software in version 14, it's giving us a greater system availability during offline function, enhanced system with increased security, expanded functionality with backend programs. And the reason why we placed this in April to be completed is we're still waiting on a couple punch list items, which is they're going to be installing some touchless centers into our exit columns, and we're also waiting on our HID cards to be delivered so we can start the process of getting our permits and our prepaid cards up and running. Next slide, please. So from now until September, as Mr. Dayton was saying, our SCIDATA team is preparing us for our license plate recognition. We're going to go lot by lot, and that's what we're doing now. So as of right now, we are currently working on installing conduit for our LPR system, and the next couple of steps will be a loop installation and a server update to make sure that we can be functional with LPR. Around July, we're going to be starting to test the LPR, and then hopefully we are fully functional with at least, again, continuing to test by September. Next slide, please. So next month in May, we'll start to be able to utilize some of our different payment options. One of them is going to be our touchless payment option. This payment option does not require physical contact. It's a very secure method of payment using near field communication. We put some examples down there. That's going to be the Google Pay, Samsung Pay, and Apple Pay, where our customers can insert their entrance ticket in the exit column and then utilize this form of payment on that sensor that's going to be on that exit column. Next slide, please. So another update is a new EMV compliant credit card reader that's installed and it should be up and running again in May. This is the ability to use smart cards and chip cards for improved security, as well as PCI compliance to prevent security breaches. Next slide, please. So also in May, we're going to have completed several different upgrade plans that we'll be bringing to the committee. The first one is going to be an operational plan. This operational plan is going to show key milestones and strategies for successfully implementing our automated parking system. Next slide. Second plan that will be coming will be our staffing plan will also be coming in May. The staffing plan will show strategies for maintaining optimal staffing levels to support our operational plan. And this is just making sure that we have that correct amount of staff for customer service. Next slide, please. Another item that we'll be bringing to this committee will be our accessibility plan. This accessibility plan is going to evaluate and address access needs for customers with disabilities. That plan is continuing to be worked on, and again, we'll be bringing that to the committee in May. Next slide. Last but not least for our plans, actually, I think we might have, nope. Last but not least is going to be our public outreach plan. This plan is to keep our customers informed of changes to payment methods and parking options to encourage a seamless transition to an automated model. Next slide, please. One of the upgrades that we will have up and running in July will be our SWEB mobile payment. This payment method is a convenient and fast touch-free payment method. It utilizes a QR code that's going to be placed on our entrance tickets, where a customer can use that QR code to make an online payment for their parking fees. They will exit the parking lot, enter that ticket into the exit column, and the gate will go up with already being paid. Next slide, please. So also in July, we're going to be bringing to this committee a billing system project plan. This plan is going to determine needs, application, and implementation for our fee due billing system. So for those of you who don't know, our fee dues are those items that we provide to customers when they don't have a means to pay at the exit column. So this new system is going to improve that model and hopefully at that point be able to bill a customer from there. Next slide, please. So in August, we'll be bringing a plan for our command center. And in this plan for our command center, we're going to have a design of a command center. It's going to be placed here in our downtown parking office and used to facilitate remote customer support and lot monitoring. So that plan will also be brought to the committee in August. Next slide, please. So the one piece I'm missing in here, and like Rob was saying, is that we look to be fully operational with our LPR in January. So at that point, all of our plans will be in place, will be fully automated and ready to go. Any questions?
And then, Mr. Penner, Chair Penner, the last thing I would just add, and thank you so much, Mr. Forney, for such a great presentation, is that once the committee has seen all those plans, our timeline will populate with more action items because the plans are going to show when we have to take specific actions leading up to actually having automation in January.
Great. Thank you very much. And Mr. Forney, great presentation. It reminds me a little bit of, I think in the February minutes, I mentioned the idea of starting to see a graph of where we're at. So that was more than a great graph presentation on what we're doing. So thank you very much. Before I open up the committee, I do have one question, and maybe I missed it and not sure. On it's referred to the SWEB system, SWEB. I'm not sure what that stands for, but on all the mobile pay systems that we're looking at or are processing, this is not software that someone has. Is there software that someone has to download on their system? What do they have to have? Do we expect someday to have a City of Santa Barbara parking download? How do we see that happening?
I'm sorry. So Chair Pinner, you're referring to the SWEB mobile payment, is that correct?
I'm kind of asking two questions. What the SWEB mobile payment, how that works from someone's phone? Is that just doesn't require any additional software programming for an individual?
It does not, no. So what
Okay.
would happen is with the QR code, the QR code is automatically going to populate that web-based payment option. You don't have to download anything. So at that point, from right there, you'll be able to it'll display your fees. And again, we're still trying to work all this out and see a little bit more of this. But display fees, give them an option to pay. They pay right there, and they're able to exit. So no extra applications needed to be downloaded.
So that's really as long.
Mr. Chair, I just add to that this is our, remember the name of the game here is customer service. In our worst nightmares, automation means longer queues and more difficult for customers to get out. So we want to design for a customer experience that is perhaps better than we have today. It's not going to have that personal touch, but the SWEB mobile pay, if we can effectively get those who know how to point a camera at a QR code and then click the link, that is our best option to keep the flow on the queue going, because then you will not need to stop at the column. LPR will recognize your plate that you've paid, and the gate will open on approach. Similar to what it would do as a complimentary fee, as we experience in Paseo Nuevo, that already has the LPR system. So this is the one option that we made sure to have. It costs us a little bit extra, but this is the one that will give us better customer service, assuming we can get the public to understand how to use it. And that's not an easy task, but that's our public outreach plan.
Right, and excellent, and it is going to be a lot of public outreach. But it leads me to the next question: Do we see a time where, as LPR, as a parker, as opposed to doing the SWEB pay, ultimately would I be able to have an account on file so that when I come up to the recognizes my license plate, and then I will be able to just be charged to an account as opposed to using the ticket each time? That's a future item I'm asking. I'm just trying to look for that connection.
Yeah, Chair Pinner, we'll look into that. That kind of reminds me of what we'll be doing with our monthly permits, which is just whitelisting all those license plates, and then they get to drive in and drive out with the gate just going up when it registers with LPR. I believe there is some type of system like that with SKIDATA, and we'll most definitely look into it and bring it to the committee.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I would just add to that, something that's extremely sensitive on this issue is as you know, the council approved and you forwarded to them license plate recognition policy, which is designed to protect users, our customers' personal information. So the type of nuance that you're talking about, where someone's license plate would be on file, and Mr. Forney has rightly recognized the permits. Those are people who choose to have their information on file. In no case would someone's information be on file unless they choose to have a permit where their license plate now becomes their permit. But the direct answer to your question in terms of the having your license plate on file, the SWEB mobile pay alleviates the need for that. So we don't have to have a downtown parking app, which is really hard to get people to load at. That's the barrier there. This one means that you don't have to have an app. You just aim your camera at the QR code, you click the link, and it tells you how much. You click your mobile pay device, it pays it. The system knows you've paid it, lets you out. So there's no need for you to have your license plate on file to use the system. And as our LPR policy says, the council approved, your information is purged on a 24-hour basis.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Okay, Mr. Zorantes, I see you have your camera on. Do you have a question, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk. Hi, Roy. Nice to see you. I just wanted to talk about the staffing plan, and since there's going to be less employees, does that mean longer shifts? Is there an increase? Well, not an increase, but like a change of from temporary employee to potentially part-time employee? Will we see extra benefits for these, what's ever going to be left of the staff?
So, committee members that out there. So good questions, and I think a lot of this is going to be answered in our staffing plan. I will let you know this is that we will continue to keep staff at an optimal level to ensure customer service. So please understand that we will do that and make sure that our system is functional with our staff out there assisting the public up until the point where we can see where the system can be automated. So we plan on bringing a good amount of employees in and keeping them on staff until we can move forward. And again, there's no plans for layoffs, nothing like that. Again, this will all come in our staffing plan. So we'll most definitely be providing the committee with more information.
So, and then also before the pandemic, or I guess like right when the pandemic started, I'm sure people were let go. Will they come back, and will you bring people back who were previously left out?
So just to let you know, at this point now, as we continue to hire, and we are trying to staff right now at a very high level to open up some of our parking lots, right? To optimize, again, customer service and revenue collection. We offered every single person that was laid off in March had been offered an opportunity to come back. A lot of them did, a lot of them did not, just other items came up. But yes, every single one of them was asked to see if they were interested in returning, and for whatever reason, some chose not to.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee before public comment? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Clark, can we go ahead and open public comment for this item?
Sorry, I think your microphone's muted. Ms. Clark, we didn't hear you.
Maybe Ms. Clark's having some technical difficulties there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got her back.
Okay, I apologize. I don't know why my microphone cut out. I did not see any hands raised for public comment. No.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Clark. We'll go ahead and close public comment on this item. And I'll turn it back then to the committee for any additional questions, comments regarding sort of the status and the process of where we're at with rolling out our types of paying systems, our new columns leading us to LPR. Mr. France.
Thank you, Chair Pinner. I would just like to appreciate Mr. Forney. Great presentation. Thank you. Thanks for letting us know kind of the checkpoints this year that we'll be getting more information. It seems like you all have a great, I guess kind of 9-month plan at this point to get to operation to launch. And that seems like exactly the right way to go. This is a difficult transition in a lot of ways. So I just want to appreciate you all for the professionalism and kind of thoughtfulness in the approach. I will just say I parked in a lot in Long Beach a couple weeks ago, and it was an LPR, and it was really weird to roll back up, and then the gate just opened, and I was like, and it said like, this is an automated lot. And anyway, it was an interesting experience, and I'll just say it actually was really cool. So
Thank you.
Well, we aim to be cool, Mr. Franz. It's not on our mission statement, but it's in there somewhere. Okay, without that, I think we'll go ahead and close this item. Thank you, Mr. Forney. Look forward to the continuation on this and updates, and continuing the public outreach. That's probably the biggest, getting the public to understand what we're doing is a big part of this. So that's going to be but I know you guys are up to the task. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 8, program updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. So we have a couple updates. One is State Street Promenade. We always talk to you about what's going on. And wow, what a year we have had the last 12 months. So, you know, and what's really interesting about the season is it's very easy to look at today and forget where we've been. So just a little bit of a recap. You know, we the council decided to close State Street from Haley to Victoria, a partial closure to Sola. Victoria Street was also closed on the west block to allow restaurants to come out for outdoor dining because the state had closed them down inside. And what we found was pretty remarkable. Not only did people come to those restaurants, but we had a lot of people go to State Street. And then ever since, we've been trying to manage that street as we move through the pandemic. So our first goal was to shore up businesses and to have them have some amount of success or survival. In some cases, restaurants did even better than they did pre-COVID. And then in some cases, it was just survival. And then in some cases, you know, and some retail businesses didn't work out. We have a lot of storefronts that are now vacant because of the pandemic. Now, as we've gone through the process, we're moving from survival mode to this interim State Street ahead of a planning process where we're trying to adjust, not just for business survival, but to make it look better, to make it function better. One of the things the council struggled with is bikes versus pedestrians. Bicycles and pedestrians don't mix. There's a lot of discomforts with that. It's not that the plaza is not safe, but people get a little frightened when a cyclist is going by faster. And then pedestrians don't signal their intentions generally, and so they might not recognize that they're actually walking amongst bicycles, and they might take a sudden turn to another place, putting themselves in the way of a cyclist that is very nervous that they might hit them. So we've done some improvements at intersections to try to create some organization and some places to create more feeling of safety at the intersections where you need it most. And now we have engaged the AIA, that's American Institute of Architects, and members of the HLC to bring aesthetics to the guidelines for these parklets. So we've been working with them. We've got our first round. So our current guidelines actually include aesthetic elements. I don't know if you've seen them, but I think it's number 29. The 29th version of the guidelines on State Street include aesthetic elements. We added those to the guidelines that are for parklets citywide as well. And now we're moving into an era where the council has said, we're going to extend the ordinance a year. So that happened last month or I guess it's 7 weeks ago now. We're going to extend the emergency ordinance another year on State Street. And then the state is opening, as Ms. Clark said, they're projected they're going to open up June 15th. So people are getting their vaccines. And so there may be some light at the end of this dark place. And so we need to do exactly what we've done before. We need to be flexible and nimble. We need to address the issues as they arise. There's a lot of homeless issues right now that the city is combating. And it's mainly the behavioral issues that are caused because of those homeless issues. And so we're trying to now pivot as we start to open up. What's going to happen relative to the parklets is on State Street, this is specifically on State Street, not citywide, is that we're going to go to council in the next 2 months with a guideline that will take us through to the end of the emergency period. So the guidelines for the parklets will talk about what are the space needs on the sidewalks now that restaurants are open inside. One of the things that the AIA and the architects are interested in is not having coverings, just do umbrellas. Right now, we're about to implement a structure moratorium, so no more structures on State Street to be purchased or to be installed. We're widening slightly the pedestrian access from 6 feet to 8 feet clearance on the sidewalks now that there's more capacity inside for restaurants. So when we get to council, we'll be having a list of things that the guidelines will spell out what dates things need to change, presumably up until the end of the emergency period, or if something happens ahead of that, that will all be described. So those are the things that are going on State Street promenade activity, and happy to entertain any questions about that now.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Yes, and concur that it's been a rough year, and it's exciting to see the uptick in activity and sort of level of hope in many businesses and residents and visitors. I think it's been a pretty active month for visitations with spring break. I think being a couple hours away from a large metropolitan area like LA, we get a lot of folks who choose not to fly but choose to visit us, Santa Barbara. So that's been I think a plus for our area, and we've obviously had great weather, so that's fantastic. So we hope this trend continues for us. The question I have, just it's not a big issue, but I wonder, has there been discussion from the city? Prior to pandemic, there was an economic cost to having tables and chairs out in the public right away. And obviously during the emergency, that sort of became, hey, we're in a mode that we have to just help people survive. Has there been discussion about, as this morphs, where are we going from the public right away with regards to use areas? And has there been any discussion, or is that until it's the emergency order ends or extension of the emergency order ends in March? Has there been any discussion about that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're talking about all things, and one of those that we've heard from the public pretty regularly is how is it that restaurants get to take over this public space without any kind of doubling? Now, if the inside's opening, now you have a lot more restaurant space. Is there a public benefit to that needs to be charged? And so those are things that we're going to be talking about. I don't know what the appetite is for that. Clearly, we're not out of the woods in terms of the economic aspects of State Street, so it'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I guess obviously as downtown parking has been involved with the plaza, then the question is, obviously those dollars go somewhere, and who's helping to deal with what costs are being offset. So I'm just questioning where that conversation is going, and I have heard it. It's come to me a few times, so I just wanted to make sure it's being noted here in our committee that it's being thought of. So, okay, I'll go to Mrs. Rantes first, and then I'll go to Barbara.
Oh, hello. So you touched on the homeless situation in Santa Barbara. Is there any real conversation going on there, or just like this is a problem, we need to focus on it? But is there any actual plan on what to do with the houseless in Santa Barbara?
Mr. Chair and committee members Zarate, Yes, there's actually a host of people who are working on the issue. The leadership is primarily from community development, but the library is involved, and we also have the sustainability department is involved. Police obviously involved, and then we have service providers that the city pays in Santa Barbara, SB Act, and then CityNet, who does the boots on the ground engagement with the homeless, and then our ambassadors, which are part of downtown parking, the red shirts that walk downtown, they are kind of the eyes and the ears for that entire team, knowing all the names, knowing all the behaviors, knowing all the routines. One of the things that we are challenged with is that the homeless like to be in the alcoves along State Street, and so we have authority letters we can post to take them out of those, and we're working on making sure those authority letters, which have to be renewed every year, making sure that those are there so PD can move them out of those spaces. But one of the things that our ambassadors will tell us, and CityNet will tell you, is that State Street is also the safest place for them to sleep in terms of the feeling, the perception of safety. So it's quite a balance between compassion and then also making sure that the behaviors that go along with that are kept in check. But downtown parking is very involved, and there's many more resources going into that. And there are some things on the horizon that we've heard about from the CityNet team that are pretty promising. Lots of money coming down from the state to get people housed temporarily, and then to have wraparound services with them to either get housed, which is rare, or get reunited with family members that can support them. We're not hearing you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry about that. I was calling on Miss Silver. I think, Miss Silver, you were having a problem with your mic earlier on, so I think Miss Clark might have to unmute you. Do we have you now, Miss Silver? Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes.
We hear you. We hear you.
Okay. In the lead up before the meeting, I was having the same kinds of problems that Sarah had in the middle of the meeting. So, Rob, in your report, you didn't mention anything about accessibility. So, you know, it's been a year now, and I'm happy to hear there's going to be a moratorium on the parklets, at least a temporary moratorium, and that the sidewalk is going to be widened. But what are we doing as far as a record of how many and who are, what's going on? Because the presentation to the Access Committee, the last one, we got a report that was very incomplete, and Victor wasn't there. And so could you tell me what's the status on compliance and enforcement for the ADA regulations?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Silver. I think that was the day he retired, by the way.
Yes, we were very disappointed.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure he was too. So the deal was that, and I appreciate the question, but first, one clarification, Committee Member Silver, it's not a moratorium on parklets, it's a moratorium on the structures. So it's not a moratorium on parklets, just the structures. So no new structures on State Street. That's what we're rolling out.
What is the difference between structures and parklets?
So some parklets can go in the street, and they put chairs and tables in the street and put plantings around the outside. That's okay. But building an actual structure with wood.
So then parklets could be like pop-up parklets, here today, gone tomorrow.
That's correct. They're more flexible, and we do have many parklets on State Street that are not a structure. But let me get to your question, which is a really good one, and I'm so glad you brought it up. Yeah, our enforcement efforts have been very challenging. We do have 2 staff members who are working on it. We're about to get a 3rd staff member who will be working on it. It's very difficult to get compliance, particularly for not just for ADA, but for other people. other aspects of the guidelines that are enforced. We're working closely with the attorney's office. We're working with 2 attorneys. We've done several walkthroughs now with the attorney. The specific reason we're working with the attorney's office is because when we hand off an enforcement case, we have to prove to the city attorney's office that the parklet operator did not comply over a period of time. So we have to show them a file of pictures, notes on conversations with names of certain people. It's very challenging with restaurants in particular, because you never know who's going to be present, whether there'll be a manager or we're talking to a server or we're talking to the owner. So there are some challenges with that, but we are taking the enforcement effort very seriously, and are meeting with the attorney's office to that end regularly throughout the week.
Does that mean the city attorney's office has explained to you what the process must be? There is a process, and you're now attempting to comply with it?
Yeah, the process you're referring to is essentially what the attorney's office needs to take someone to court, and that sounds rather extreme, but in fact, what the attorney's office will point out is that you don't know when a parklet operator is going to come into compliance, so you have to assume in the preparation of the file that it will not work out, and that you will go to court. And so that requires the information and the, let's see, what's the best way to put it? The
documentation.
Documentation, but then also we need to show that we gave the operator the benefit of the doubt, that we gave them every opportunity to comply and they still would not. So that has lengthened the process quite a bit. I do believe, Committee Member Silver, that Brian DeMore will be sharing our updated spreadsheet to the Access Committee that has, it's overwhelming the amount of violations on that spreadsheet.
Oh no, we are certainly expecting that, and that's what we've been very concerned about, is that violations have been tolerated, and yet this is on city property where we do have a liability as a city. So it's not just the Access Committee, there are concerns beyond that should be documented.
And to be clear, Mr. Chair and Committee Member Silver, there is no tolerance for violations of ADA issues or the other violations that are non-ADA. There is no tolerance for that. I think the challenge for us all is we've adopted a program where it has no staffing assigned to it, and this is everyone doing their jobs, and then also the job of trying to enforce on parklets. That includes the city attorney's office. So the amount of effort this has taken is pretty overwhelming.
But you do now have staff assigned to it.
Oh yes,
as you said.
We do.
Okay.
And my hope is by the end of this week, we'll have another person staffing it too. So that will have, well, including myself, that'll be 4 people involved in the enforcement process.
Oh, thank you very much. Because when you left it out of your report, then I started waving my hand. So thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, I will, Mr. France, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Pinner. I'll try to be quick. Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Quick question, and forgive me if I'm just way behind on this, but similar to how there's public seating on the sidewalks prior to the pandemic, that there's a city fee. I imagine during the pandemic and emergency, just to allow businesses to survive, that would all be waived. What's the long-term vision for that for parklets?
Okay, Mr. Chair.
I think Mr. France missed my question earlier.
He did. Yeah, he might have missed it. So remember, France. So we're talking about that, and that is a narrative that's out there, quite frankly. I will tell you that the outdoor dining fee was dramatically reduced, I believe, in 2018. as a way to incentivize more restaurants to bring activity out into the street, as a way to bring more people downtown. And I think what we've seen with the pandemic is when you force everyone to eat outside, it all of a sudden seems like there's a lot more activity on State Street. So it'll be very interesting to see as people decide to eat inside. I was very, very surprised the last two places I ate at downtown in the last 2 weeks. I'm like, hey, let's sit inside. And I was pretty surprised at myself even that I decided to do that. It has been a little nippy lately in the evenings. It'll be interesting to see how that changes people's perception of the activity on State Street. And then we're going to have to work with downtown Santa Barbara to talk with the businesses about, if we did bring back some sort of a fee, like what would work, what makes sense, what's not overburdensome, what's easy to track, how will that affect an operator's stance. I would like to see, and we don't have it, but I'd like to see a report on how did people do? What's the range of success that we've created, and we don't have that information yet.
Great, thank you, and my apologies for spacing. The other quick question that I noticed.
I was gonna say, that's okay. Mr. Dayton gave you a longer and more complete answer than he gave me, so I'm glad it was asked a second time.
So a second question, super appreciate all of the managing of all of the different types of traffic on State Street. Again, the problems of success, right? That there's been so much activity on State Street that there's also been conflicts, and all of the the planters and the delineation for bikes. The quick question I have there is the feasibility remaining of kind of a dog leg to avoid the 500 block. So basically connecting Fig and Haley to get back to State, that one little bit. Like going down, you can just jog over. Well, yeah, you can just jog over with traffic, but coming back, you can't easily. I wonder if that's still in the realm of possibilities.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Committee Member France, we have been talking about that, and that requires eliminating parking on the northerly side of Haley for that space on the west block between State and Fig. We're still looking at that. We're looking at other options too about, in the guidelines about how the 500 block could be managed better. Regardless of whether we do that route or not, what we do believe is that people will continue to bike, either walking or riding on the 500 block. And as we've found in this experiment, is that it's very difficult to enforce otherwise. Some of the narratives we're hearing in the community now is let's eliminate bikes altogether from State Street. I actually don't know how that would happen, like how you could eliminate bikes from State Street without police officers at every corner saying, hey, no, you can't be here. And as we know, the police are very sparsely thinned in terms of resources and are working very diligently on other issues that perhaps could be defined as more pressing than stopping cyclists from riding on State Street. So the whole what to do and what's a good idea needs to also take into account we can't make people do very many things. It's very difficult to make people wear masks or don't bike here, walk your bike. And the gravity, if you will, is that people want to bike and walk on State Street and they love the middle of the street.
Yeah, the pedestrians and bikes both.
We're all people, right? So the vote is people like to walk down the center of State Street.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I'll just say again, that's been the main route for 100 years, and so it's the only way to easily get under the freeway. So it is what it is. That's going to be a through route for bikes, illegal or not legal, and might as well make that make sense. I really appreciate hearing as the standards have changed in this 29th iteration, which just shows the city's responsiveness to need, which I don't think can be complimented enough, that you all probably took quite a bit of flack to put bureaucracy aside to allow businesses to survive, to allow our downtown to survive. So kudos to that. I'll say I really appreciate changing the standards for space, for the sidewalk, for the moratorium on structures. And I really hope that space for the main kind of access through the street also is being looked at. And I also hope that we don't get into a habit of grandfathering in structures. It's a terrible legacy of Santa Barbara that we love to grandfather things in instead of change the standard. So if that's public right of way and there's new standards over time, everybody should adhere to those new standards. We don't need more grandfathers, which, by the way, if you look into the history of that expression, is a terrible expression based on disenfranchising voters. So let's get out of grandfathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. France. Any other program updates? And then I have to ask Ms. Clark, I forget, do we need to open public comment on this topic?
So she'll figure that out. Go ahead.
Yes, we do, Mr. Pinner.
Okay,
So
well, let me let Mr. Dayton finish.
I'll just give you one more program update, which is regarding the downtown master plan. It's Downtown Area Master Plan Advisory Committee. You may have heard that council decided to move forward with an area, downtown State Street area master planning process. The area is roughly from the freeway to Sola Street. It encompasses both full blocks on either side of State Street, so Anacapa to Chapala. It encompasses of a host of issues that will include State Street design and amenities, transportation circulation, housing and redevelopment opportunities, economic development, historic resources, equity and accessibility, homeless strategies, public performing arts, operations and maintenance, and a funding strategy to get it all done. That the council has selected a process by which 15 members will be a part of that process. 10 of those people will be is an application process, so any community member can apply. And if you go to the city website, I think that if you just Google State Street Advisory Committee, you'll get to the site. The application period deadline is going to be May 20th at 5 p.m. May 20th at 5 p.m. is the deadline for application. The application on the website shows you the answers, how to apply. The interviews are now scheduled for June 8th and June 15th. The council will do the interviews of those 10 appointed people from the community. And then after that committee has been established, at some point we will start the process for the master planning process, which will most likely include some consultants. People are talking about world-renowned consultants who do these type of things for promenades. At question will also be what people are assuming some portion of the street will be closed. How much of that street will be closed, I think, is a part of the process. And then during all of that time, which is a long-range vision process, we will continue to manage the interim process, which is State Street. So it's very interesting. It's a milestone moment for the city of Santa Barbara, much like we had 50 years ago when the downtown merchants decided to change State Street to what we see today, or with cars, from a parking on either side and a 5-lane road. So here's another milestone change, another 50 years. We'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. Great report and keeping us updated on downtown. Mr. Newkirk.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And Chair Pinner. What type of budget is there for that process, and is there a sense of the timeline? Because putting on my planner hat sounds like an extremely expensive and long process.
Mr. Chair and Committee Member Newkirk, both our planning hats are on, and we both think the same thing. So there's two funding sources. One would be the price tag of whatever we do at the end and decide to do as a community, as a council. In the capital plan, we have a plug number for 80 million. No idea if that is too low or too high. And of course, we don't know what really we're doing yet because we haven't done the master planning process. The funding and resources and staffing for the master planning process is now under discussion internally with staff. I would imagine we would be taking that to council probably sometime between May and July. So pretty wide window, but still trying to figure that out. And so we don't know the price tag of the actual process. Timeline, I think, will be driven mainly by the advisory committee and the advisory committee's intentionality on how they want to guide the process. It will be, I think that the challenge will always be, Committee Newkirk, so it's an excellent question you bring up. The challenge for our community at this moment in time will be how long does the community tolerate the conversation? Much like the State Street Promenade, it was celebrated when it was opened as a win, but now is getting tired. We had to remove the palm trees that people were complaining, oh, those palm trees, which were celebrated day one, became very, very tired, even just 3 or 4 months in. And so what is the tolerance level for the community for the decision to be percolated, if you will, I think is a big thing for us to all think about.
Yeah, I guess I would follow up with a comment then. Is this master plan has a lot of moving parts. And so I think certainly for our committee and other community members interested in State Street, that kind of interim planning is going to be really important, because I don't see this project like a master plan getting approved anytime soon if all those moving parts are still like going to stay in that planning process. That's way too complicated to get done in anything more than many years. So I think that, when you talk about, the parklet design stuff going as far as like the emergency orders, like I think that interim period is going to just get longer and longer and longer. And so I think it's really important that we kind of have a vision for that interim period, because I think it'll stick around for a while.
Agreed. And as you can imagine, people who are wanting to open a shop on State Street or thinking about it or possibly doing it will want to know, well, what am I opening a shop to? So there's a certain dimension of this that the longer it takes, the longer we stall out economic incentive or understanding of what people are investing in. So I'm with you, Committee Member Newkirk. I think faster is better. A lot of people side will make comments then, well, if it's Santa Barbara, it's got to be done right. I think that that's totally important to think about as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment at this time for this item. Ms. Clark.
We do have one hand raised for public comment. Accessible Santa Barbara, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, you should be able to speak now, Accessible Santa Barbara.
Good morning, everybody. This is Will Railing for Accessible Santa Barbara. It's been a while, so nice to be able to check in with you. And thanks a lot for that presentation, Mr. Dayton. I have a couple of questions, and the first, I would just like to say that I think it's great to hear that you have 2 staff on working on enforcement, and that there's actually 2 attorneys from the city attorney's office involved, and I think you mentioned there's a 3rd staff person starting. I would love to hear maybe who on your staff is taking lead on that now that Mr. Garza has retired. And that's a question, I guess. My second question is, you mentioned that the difficulty is that the if the city attorney's office is going to take someone to court, that they need to really, lay a foundation and a history that's clear in terms of a factual record. But I guess I'm a little, I'm wondering why they believe it's necessary to take someone to court, because I remember when the parklets and everything started, the beauty of it, as you pointed out back then, was that there's no permit. It's so different than the way things have been done in the past with city bureaucracy. They were just allowing people to use the public right of way with no permit, so they could do it quickly. And now that might have, initially been a difficulty for enforcement, but now I'm wondering, why isn't that an advantage for enforcement? Because, on any given day, it's basically at the city's, tolerance that someone can set up a commercial activity in the public right of way. And so you don't have these issues of revocation of a permit that you normally get. So I'm just wondering if it's possible to respond to that issue in terms of whether going to court, why that would be necessary. If Accessible Santa Barbara decided to, raise some funds by, setting up a table on State Street to sell, let's say our map to the celebrity homes, as a fundraiser, and we'd probably be dragged off pretty quickly. Our table would be confiscated. We have no right to be conducting a commercial activity on a street or sidewalk. And so it seems to me that Public Works has tools at its disposal to enforce without going to court. And I'm just wondering if that's something that could make enforcement better. Lastly, I know that the jurisdiction of this committee is, the downtown core, and I appreciate that. But for just for a second, I hope people can try to imagine from the perspective of a person with a disability going out to dinner. So they say they've been in the hospital with an injury. They're now using a wheelchair. They're getting out. Family wants to take them out to celebrate, enjoy some non-hospital food. Where are we going to go? Well, it's not necessarily State Street, right? And there's hundreds and hundreds of restaurants citywide, that have reopened, taking advantage of this opportunity to do business in the public right of way. So I'd like to hear if, although it's perhaps out of the jurisdiction of this committee a little bit, whether the city is actually addressing accessibility issues at these locations outside of State Street and, citywide, Coast Village Road, Upper State, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. Before staff comments, I will say, we probably do want to limit our discussion to the things that happen to our jurisdiction. So I'm not sure we'll get able to address the last part of that question, but Mr. Dayton, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, Mr. Chair, happy to answer. If you'd finish public comment, that'd be great.
I'm sorry. Sarah, do we have any other public speakers wishing to speak?
We do not have any other hands raised right now.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Clark. Sorry about that, Mr. Dayton. It's hard when you can't see the people waiting in line.
It's
rushing
true.
the podium. Go ahead.
Really appreciate Mr. Chair and Mr. Will Relling for bringing up those questions. They're really good questions. They're things that we think about all the time. So the two staff members that are working on enforcement, Steve Sisler and Sarah Clark, as the supervising that. I am also involved on the street, constantly walking, riding my bike up and down the street throughout the weekend, paying attention, sitting in parklets, watching things and seeing how they work. So the eyes on the street are extensive, and that's how the enforcement process is working. The second question that Mr. Relling asked is very important, and what I would have thought would have been a very easy thing to do, and that is, if you give all this permission without a permit, can't you very easily take it away? And what we found out is, no, you cannot easily take it away. And some of that has been extremely frustrating for us personally. There are, first I'll say is there's many parklet operators, perhaps 80% that are very respectful and cooperative, and then there's probably 20% that are causing 80% of the issues. And that is a big deal, and it's hard to get people to change. And so we have to. One of the things that we're told again and again, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, even though we feel we've told them many, many times. So the documentation and the file building is really, really important. Mr. Relling asked about, this enforcement issue and taking people to court. Is it really necessary to develop that? Can't we just have the attorneys walk out there? And actually, when the attorneys walk out there, we do get a little bit a more standard attention response. And so we like that when someone from the attorney's office can walk, for instance, with Steve Sisler on the street, that we want that, we ask for that. As much as we can get that, we will take that. But building that case, as it turns out, is the thing that it convinces the people and the parklet, and then the people of the political structure, because people will complain to the political structure. If someone feels, they might say, hey, I'm being harassed, I'm being asked to take out something you gave me that's important to my business, we have to then turn around and prove that almost to an extensive amount that, no, we've been asking for this. We have to point out exactly the issue. There's so many examples that are coming to my mind right now that I want to talk about, but I won't. And then citywide, just because it is downtown parking that is doing citywide, that is the next thing to tackle. And we're going to have to come up with an interim guideline to pull back on those parklets as well, because different from State Street is, does the city even want to have parklets at any time in the future? And I don't know what the answer to that question is. Certainly, we don't want them to look like they do now. So I think the good news, if there is a silver lining, is that now that we're opening up, there's a lot of accessibility inside that is regulated more heavily. That is no excuse for the outside to not conform for the ADA compliance that's needed. There's a very long list of that compliance. In fact, I think that Mr. DeMora is going to be bringing you, the Access Committee, our checklist. We now have a checklist. It's like a citation ticket that has every ADA piece required, along with the other guidelines, in duplicate, that we actually have to give the parklet operator as evidence of our seeing. And now we've included pictures of the absence of those compliance. So we are getting some compliance, but it is challenging, and we appreciate the questions that we're getting.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I believe that wraps up item number 8 for program updates. Thank you, Mr. Dayton, for that. Very active, as we know, on State Street with all that. A lot of changes over the next months as we head towards June 15th there. Appreciate that. Any announcements?
The only announcement I have, Mr. Chair, is, again, I'll just restate that the applications for the State Street Advisory Committee are due on May 20th at 5 p.m. Council did not select this committee to be represented. Anyone from the committee can apply. It does matter that you have people that you represent, so include that in the application. And then the other announcement I'll make is that, as you know, Mr. Garza is no longer with us. That leaves a big hole in our operations. We are waiting to see what the resolution will be for the downtown effort, to see how that position can help with that effort, as well as fulfilling the standard operations in downtown parking. For now, I will continue to fill his role in his office and be a presence in downtown, almost 100%, coming back to, and Jessica Grant is taking over for transportation planning for now, although there are some duties that I do keep in that realm as well. And with that, there are no more announcements, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dayton. And we do recognize and appreciate the extra load you've taken on recognize the big hole that Mr. Garza's absence leaves for us. His history with the city and his passion for making a better place made it all better for all of us. And we're sad for his retirement. We're sad that it happened during a time that we're on computers and not in person. And I look forward to the opportunity to have a gathering with Mr. Garza and thank him for all his efforts that he has done for us and for the community of Santa Barbara. He is greatly missed in our operations. And I know most importantly, your day-to-day world and all the staff miss his involvement. So we thank him through this announcement report, but we look forward to an opportunity to do so in a much more grand way. So thank you for that.
Well said.
With no further announcements and other items on our agenda, it is time, and just a few minutes shy of our 9 o'clock ending time, it is time for adjournment. So I thank you all and look forward to things brighter and more hopeful and more prosperous here in our community. So until May, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.